The morning sun stretched its fingers across the desert, painting the sand in soft hues of orange and gold. A lone figure trudged through the dust, his boots sinking slightly into the earth with every step. He was a man worn by years of wandering, a man who carried the weight of battlefields long forgotten, of lost friends, and a past that was more haunting than healing. His name was Elias, and he was used to moving, used to the grind of survival. His horse, the last of a dwindling line of animals that had carried him across miles of unforgiving land, walked beside him, a slow shuffle in the heat, ribs visible through the dust. It was a tired creature, much like its rider. Elias didn't speak to it much anymore. His words were few and his thoughts were distant. Each step took him further from the man he once was, deeper into a world where belonging felt like a dream he'd long forgotten. The saddlebag on his shoulder was light, but heavy with memories. A blanket, a water skin, and dried meat. Elias had no clear destination, just a need to keep moving, a need to make it to the next trading post, maybe sell a hide, maybe find shade for a night. The desert was vast, and the horizon stretched endlessly, promising nothing but dust. That's when he saw her, a slight figure, half hidden by a wash of rocks. At first, Elias thought it might be a coyote or some wounded animal, but as he stepped closer, he saw the girl, young, no older than 17, Apache by her features. She lay against a slab of stone, her torn dress and bruised body telling a story of flight and struggle. Her ankle was swollen, her skin scraped and bloodied. The leather strap of her moccasin dangled loosely from her foot. Elias froze. Her eyes flickered open, meeting his with a sharp look of distrust. She was waiting, watching, expecting him to be like the others, a threat. Her breathing quickened, and Elias knew that fear had marked her heart. A white man in the desert, alone and armed, was nothing but danger to her. For a moment, Elias was tempted to turn away, to leave her to her fate. Trouble had always followed him, and he'd learned long ago that keeping his distance was the best way to survive. But something stopped him, something in the way she winced in pain as she tried to sit up, something in the vulnerability he saw in her eyes. He couldn't leave her like this. Elias stepped closer, crouching down beside her, his voice calm and steady as he spoke, though he knew she likely couldn't understand his words. "Easy," he said, his hand raised in a gesture of peace. Her eyes narrowed, still full of suspicion, but she didn't pull away. She couldn't. She was too weak. Her body betrayed her. Elias looked at her injury, her swollen ankle. She couldn't walk. She couldn't run. He looked at his horse, the last one he had. It was his only way out of the desert. Without it, he would be left to walk, to face the unrelenting heat and the empty stretch of land. But her need was greater than his own. With a deep breath, Elias stood up, his body heavy with the weight of the decision. He didn't hesitate. He took the reins of his horse and guided it toward her. The girl's eyes widened in disbelief, her hands trembling as she reached out for the reins. "It's yours," he said, his voice tight with a sense of finality. The girl gripped the reins, her fingers closing around the leather, but she didn't move. She was still staring at him, trying to understand why a stranger would give up his only means of survival. Elias didn't have an answer. All he knew was that he couldn't leave her here to die. He took his blanket roll from the saddle, slung it over his shoulder, and turned away. He couldn't look back at her. He walked beside the horse, his heart heavy with the realization of what he had done. The night came quickly, and Elias set up camp as best he could. He built a small fire, the flickering light casting shadows over the desert floor. The girl, Nalin he would come to know her as, sat by the fire, her eyes flickering between him and the dark horizon. Her ankle was wrapped with cloth, but it was clear it would take time to heal. Elias gave her water, and she drank, hesitant but thirsty. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes when two people are too tired to speak. Nalin ate slowly, her eyes watching between bites, and Elias, too, ate, but less than he should have. As the fire crackled, Elias found himself thinking about the choices that had brought him here, about the war, about the days he had spent wandering with no purpose. And now, here he was, giving up everything for a girl he didn't know, in a desert that offered nothing but hardship. The next morning, Elias woke early, the sun creeping over the horizon. He checked his horse, ran his hands over its ribs, and whispered a few words to it. It was still tired, but it had been given a new life. He would walk beside it now. He wouldn't ride again. Nalin stirred, and Elias offered her more water. She had healed a little overnight, but the road ahead would be long. They moved on slowly, the desert stretching endlessly around them. Nalin's ankle still hurt, but she was strong. With every step, she grew stronger. And with every step, Elias grew more uncertain. What would happen when they reached the next town? Would she be welcomed? Would he? Hours turned into days. The journey was slow, the heat oppressive, but Nalin never gave up. She sat tall in the saddle, her hand firm on the reins. It was no longer just survival. One evening, as the fire burned low, Elias found himself looking at Nalin. She was different now, no longer the broken girl he had found on the trail. She was steady, stronger with every passing day. The trust between them had grown, however quietly, however slowly. As the night deepened, the sound of horses' hooves broke the stillness. Riders approached, figures cutting through the night like shadows. At first, Elias thought they were traders, but as they drew closer, he saw them for what they were, Apache women. They moved with purpose, their faces unreadable. They came closer, and Elias felt his heart tighten. He knew what this moment meant. They had come for Nalin. The riders circled, eyeing Elias warily. He stood still, his hands raised slightly, showing he meant no harm. Nalin spoke quickly in Apache, her voice urgent. She pointed at him, then herself. It took only a moment before the oldest woman nodded. She wasn't here to fight. She was here to bring Nalin home. And in that moment, Elias understood something that had been building between them. He wasn't alone anymore. They weren't alone. Nalin had found her family, and Elias had found his place beside them. As the sun began to rise, the camp settled into quiet, and Elias felt something inside of him shift. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, he wasn't walking it alone. And that was enough.